Lesson Assignment 1, Lesson 1, Normal, Abnormal Behavior, paragraphs 1 through 17. After completing this lesson, you should be able to learn to define normal behavior, identify characteristics of normal behavior, identify normal defense mechanisms, define the abnormal behavior, identify characteristics of abnormal behavior, identify therapeutic interventions to treat abnormal behavior. Suggestion: after completing this assignment, complete the exercise in this lesson. These exercises will help you to achieve the lesson objectives. Lesson 1, Normal and Abnormal Behavior Introduction. Intense psychophysiological process that continue taking place with the human body. Any disturbance with a delicate homeostatic balance of the body will result in severe consequences for the individual. Correct diagnosis, correct treatment are both necessary to remedy the situation. Just the physical problem must be corrected. Physiological problem also must be corrected. Important to understand distinguishing by physiological normal processes and those processes which are abnormal. Of just great importance and necessity to distinguish physiological normal processes and those that are abnormal. Normal behavior definition. The word behavior is defined with the manner in which the individual acts or functions. The term normal behavior is a little more difficult to define. The society in which person lives to define normal behavior. For the individual, additional behavior is considered the normal in one society, but considered totally abnormal in another society. For example, the men sit the most of the day staring at the sun, considering to be exhibiting normal behavior in India, where such men are believed to be holy. In the United States, same man probably thought with deranged, perhaps looked up and referred to a psychiatrist. Normal behavior, therefore, is defined as behavior socially acceptable for the individual society. Another example of normal behavior: individuals driving an automobile, driving in the United States, automatically drive on the right side of the road unless otherwise directed by normal behavior. Driving a car on the right side of the road in England would be not normal behavior, since the group of the people to drive it on the left side of the road. Characteristics of normal behavior. Although it is very difficult to define normal behavior as possible, the list of some characteristics of normal behavior in an individual who believes normally has following attributes. He's capable of changing his actions as the situation requires. He insight for the cause and effect. He's able to understand when the cause of the dented car fender was running the red light and consequently being hit by another car. 3. He orientated time and place in person. He may not know the exact date with which, without looking at the calendar, does not know the month and year, whether he is a perception of reality. Such he knows who he is, not Napoleon, not Bob Jones, for example. He may or may not why he behaves as does at all times, usually knows why. His motivation are purposeful. He does not wander aimlessly through the life, but controls himself like his environment. Major plans include renting in an apartment and then buying a house in the future. More immediate plans may begin to go to the movie the weekends with friends for the entertainment and relaxation. 1.3. Defense mechanism. Definition. Defense mechanisms are mental maneuvers conscious for the subconscious performed by the ego oneself in order to decrease feelings of anxiety or stress. We live in a complicated world full of many pleasure events, but also full of the strains and hassle. Life strains include chronic conditions of living that are unsatisfactory, boredom, continuing family tension, job dissatisfaction, loneliness. Hassles include irritating, frustrating, distressing incidents that occur in everyday life, the disagreements of fellow workers, unpleasant surprises such as traffic tickets, losing a wallet with all the credit cards. Defense mechanisms are man's ways of dealing with stress and good and bad of living. Specific defense mechanisms: denial of reality. The simplest and most basic of all of the defense mechanisms: attempt to blank out with the disagree with the reality, ignoring it, refusing to acknowledge it. Example of smoking includes the evidence linking with the cigarette use to health problems not scientifically accurate. Repression. In the defensive mechanism, the individual selected forgetting threatening, painful thoughts, desires, exclude his or her consciousness. For example, subordinates forget to tell his supervisor of the circumstances or embarrassing situation. Rationalization. Individual justify the inconsistent, undesirable behavior by thinking up explanations which on the surface seem logical, but when examined are illogical. For the executive pads has his expense account because everybody does it. Fantasy, daydreaming, or other forms of imaginative activity to allow for the escape of the real world. Examples: employee dreams of the day and shadow of the meeting of the correct boss, mistakes and publicly acknowledge as the real leader of the unit, or student does poorly on the test, blamed for the instructor rather than his lacking of studying. Projection, a person protects himself with awareness, owns undesirable traits and unacceptable feelings by charging them the traits and feelings of the characteristics of someone else. For example, An expansionist minded dictator of a totalitarian country, absolute control by his dictator, believeth that neighboring countries are planning to invade his country. Overcompensation. A person covers up with a weakness by overemphasizing with the desired characteristics, making up with the frustration. One area of the overgratification, and another example of dangerous overweight person goes to the out eating bin. Sometimes disappoints him, makes him unhappy. He gets the Dear John letter. He eats, and the weather is bad. He goes to the coast and he eats. 7. Conversion. Individual emotional conflicts expressed with a muscular sensory overbattery. Symptoms of the disability, malfunction, or pain. Example, the individual puts in many hours of hard work on the project. Boss rejects the project. Individual develops a major headache with the force him to leave the work and go home. Identification. Person tries to raise his or her own self-esteem by patterning his behavior after the behavior of another person. Often his boss, the person may accept that his boss values belief that even vicariously share his both victories and the defeats. Example, the assistant takes the vocabulary, mannerisms, or even simplicity of his boss. Regression. Person returns reaction patterns has long since outgrown. Example, the manager blocked with some of the high visible project, busy himself with clerical duties, technical detail work which someone he supervised should. Emotional insulation. Character of the defense mechanisms include resignation, empathy, boredom. The individual breaks emotional involvement with the environment. He draws back. Emotional personal involvement. Example, the employee receiving no reward, praise, or encouragement no longer cares whether he does a good job. Reaction formation. Individual suppresses real thoughts, attitudes, the ones that are acceptable, unacceptable in his group, with the vicarious supports the opposite attitudes, one which are acceptable in his groups. For example, an employee has not been promoted, overdoes the defense of his boss, vigorously upholding the company policies. Displacement. Individual can get the direct impulse appropriate with the target, therefore he directs his impulse and substitute with the target. And a person has many frustrations at work, really feels angry with his coworker. There is no position to tell them how furious he is, so he comes home and launches a verbal tirade at his wife and children. Ritualistic behavior. Some little act performed by an individual which magically he thinks makes everything turn out alright. Example, a teenager who feels guilty about something continually does but what he knows is wrong, may touch the doorknobs a certain number of times each time after he commits an action, or a baseball player may cross himself each time he comes up to bat. Negativism. Individual actively, passively resists ideas without consciously realizing he is doing it. Example, the manager has been unsuccessful in being excused for the committee assignment. At the committee meeting, he picks apart with every suggestion that everyone makes. Note, defense mechanisms operate spontaneously, unconsciously when the self is threatened. If there are too many emergencies for the self overuses defense mechanism will result if the person does not really see reality. We all rationalize occasionally. That is a good thing because rationalization can reduce stress. It's not a good thing to base all of the judgments consistently on rationalization. That would be overuse. 1.4 Neurotic behavior definition. The word neurosis is defined by emotional maladjustments which are damage individuals' ability to think, make proper judgments, but such cause minimal loss of contact with reality. Behavior of such a person is termed neurotic behavior. The first existing neurotic behavior usually ways of coping with a daily life and provided inadequate. Person is relying more and more on extreme defense reaction. The defense reactions may help with the temporarily, but in the long run they are unsatisfactory. Type of the neurosis covered in this lesson include the following: anxiety neurosis, hysterical neurosis, phobic neurosis, and depressive neurosis. Anxiety neurosis. Individuals suffering anxiety neurosis has exaggerated uncontrollable anxiety and apprehension. Anxiety disorder is fairly common in our society. Roughly 2 to 4% of the population has been diagnosed one time or another having some type of anxiety disorder. Signs and symptoms include rather constant state of attention, worry, and general uneasiness. Such individuals often oversensitive and people-to-people relationships and frequently have feelings of inadequate depression. Emotional tension frequently leads to physical tension, which causes the neck and upper shoulders muscular pain, sleep disturbance, insomnia, and nightmares. Decisions make it difficult, and after the decision made, the individual may worry excessively over a possible disaster that may occur. Obsessive compulsive disorder. Example, anxiety identity neurosis. An obsessive compulsive, the person feels that he must do something even though he does not want to do the thing. For example, compulsion to wash his hand, therefore there's no logical reason to do so. A typical person exhibiting obsessive compulsive behavior. Hysterical neurosis, a type of neurosis, the individual loss emotional control develops in some of the physical symptoms where it seems to be an underlying cause of either, for example, stupid and aviators are found to develop vision problems, hearing problems, as well as a partial numbness of the tongue, though there was physical reason for such symptoms. Symptoms examples of the historious neurosis were no physical reason for the symptoms. Symptoms example of historical neurosis unwittingly developed by the student. The defense mechanism of the stressful situation, physical illness gave the students an acceptable way to stop flying. Just leaving the flight training program was obviously not acceptable to these students. Phobic neurosis. Phobic neurosis is a person fear of some of the object situation, but there's no real danger person situation, which a person magnifies the danger out of all the portion realities. Phobic neurosis should be confused with the normal fears. Most people have minor irrational fears from time to time, but phobic fears are intense and interfere with everyday activity. For example, people with phobic fears may go to great lengths to avoid going to a small room passageway, even with the necessary to do so, but the phobia sufferers often admit they have no real reason to be afraid of an object situation, but they say they cannot help themselves. The wide range symptoms of phobic fears include following: tension, headaches, back pain, stomach aches, stomach upsets, dizzy spells, acute feelings, panic feelings, unreality, strangeness often occur. And here's a list of the common phobic neuroses. Acrophobia, fear of high places. Agriophobia, fear of open places. Algophobia, fear of pain. Astrophobia, fear of storm and thunder and lightning. Claustrophobia, fear of closed spaces. Hematophobia, fear of blood. Mysophobia, fear of contamination or germs. Monophobia, fear of being alone. Nyctophobia, fear of darkness. Archaeophobia, fear of crowds. Pathophobia, fear of disease. Syphiliophobia, fear of syphilis. Depressive neurosis. It is difficult to distinguish between the neural depression and abnormal depression, which can be determined by the depressive neurosis. From time to time, very well but adjusted, feel sad and discouraged, pessimistic, a sense of hopefulness. With these feelings, with it all come together, we have to have the blues. Such feelings usually go away on their own. We get on with our own lives. See, neurotic depression is different with the type of the depression is more severe, but lasts longer. Additionally, a person suffering with a depressive neurosis does not bounce back to normal after a reasonable period of time. Usually a traumatic event led to the depression event, but the person can relate. A patient may exhibit the following signs and symptoms: high level of anxiety, apprehensiveness, much less activity, less of self-confidence, fewer interest, general loss of initiative. 1.5 psychotic behavior definition. Just as there is no real line between normal and neurotic behavior, there is no definite line between neurotic and psychotic behavior. A person suffering psychosis serves mental is marked by loss of contact with the reality. On the other hand, a person suffering a neurosis has only a minimal loss of contact by the reality of the emotion problem that impair his thinking and judgment. Characteristics. One typical characteristic psychotic behavior shown in the psychotic person are the following: inability to relate to reality, inability to differentiate between real and unreal, usually complete loss of insight. Causes psychosis. 4 types of psychosis are associated with physical conditions: alcohol psychosis, drug or poison, intoxication, fever, infection, and cerebral conditions. Alcoholic psychosis. Several alcoholic psychosis are pathological intoxication, delirium tremens, acute alcoholic hallucinations. These conditions classified in psychosis because of the temporary loss of contact with reality. Individuals experiencing the condition have the reaction last only a short period of time. During such time, the individuals are confused, excited, with delirious. Pathological intoxication condition. Acute reaction occurs with the people. The alcoholic tolerance condition occurs within someone who, with the alcoholic tolerance, it is low at a moment. Such causes with exhaustion, emotional stress, and other condition. Individuals consuming even moderate amounts of alcohol can cause a person to suddenly become disoriented, go into with a homicidal rage. Following the confused, disoriented state, with the person usually falls into the deep sleep, after which they may not remember anything of that happened during the time he was confused. Delirium tremens. Other known as DTs, delirium tremens, is acute mental illness, psychotic reactions, sometimes caused with withdrawal from the alcohol, prolonged alcoholic binge, head injury. Infection may also trigger the delirium tremens. Today, complication of delirium tremens can be treated with the drugs, and but half a century ago, the death rate of delirium tremens was approximately 10%. Signs of any symptom of the condition include the following: 1. Feeling disoriented. The time and place patient may behave within the church of the jail, will not recognize old friends, but will believe hospital attendants are old friends. Vivid hallucination. Individual may think he's small, fast-moving animals like snake, rat, and roaches. Acute fear. Any person may see these small animals change in form, size, color in terrifying ways. Tremors. Marked tremors, hands, tongue, lips, and hands, tongue, lips, and uncontrollably strong. Acute alcoholic hallucinosis. A condition patient appears normal and hears a voice. Initially, one voice making simple statements. Eventually, several voices issuing statements with criticizing and reapproaching the person. The voices attack the person. Most private thoughts. List of the disgustful thoughts. Proposed punishment. The conditions may still last several days, several weeks. During the width of time pyramid, patient is depressed. Some of the otherwise relatively normal psychotic symptoms experienced by the person seem to be triggered by alcohol, may have the broad range of inappropriate behavior, not part of the acute alcohol hallucinosis. Drug and poison intoxication. Drug and poison can act as intoxicating agents. Intoxicants cause psychosis, loss of contact with reality. For example, the bromides were introduced in the 1850s, quickly and popular as a sedative, were used, sometimes abused by millions of people, to discover that those with the bromides too much reacted psychotically. The users of the delusion hallucinations were a wide variety of neurological disturbances used in the modern day with the drug LSD behave psychotically. LSD users have set themselves on fire, jumped from high places. One person drilled a hole in his head with a dental drill. In all psychotic acts, cocaine laced with rat poison has been reported to intoxicate psychotically and sometimes fatally. Fever and or infection. By high fever and or severe infection can cause behavioral changes which can cause psychotic nature. Syphilis, encephalitis, and meningitis are such diseases. Individual untreated causes syphilis undergoes physical, psychological, and personality changes. These changes range become careless and inattentive at the disease initial stage, by just spending money on impossible schemes as well as performing antisocial acts publicly in later stages of the disease. Cerebral conditions. Cerebral vascular accidents, brain trauma, brain tumor, cerebral atherosclerosis can result in psychotic behavior damage. Even small pressure of the brain may cause more pressure cause impairment of the normal function of the brain. Damage may cause hallucination, general with impairment, individual intellectual processes which result in the loss of touch with reality, behaving psychotically. Schizophrenia definition. The term used with a general group of the psychotic disorders who have the chief characteristics include gross distortion of reality, withdrawal of the dealing with other people, social interaction, disorganization, perception, thought, and emotional. In other words, schizophrenic have disturbance in thinking, mood, and behavior. Schizophrenia means split mind initial given into those group disorders because it is with thought and mental disorder were caused by conflict between minds and the emotion. Between the mind and the emotions. The thing today is that there may be several kinds of schizophrenia in which may be different causes. There may be biological causes of schizophrenia. There may be environmental causes of schizophrenia. General symptoms of schizophrenia, regardless of the type of the schizophrenia, the basic experience with one disorganization, perception, thought, and emotions. Specific symptoms develop over a period of time, which vary seriousness of person to person. Symptoms include the following: disorganization in an area of previous function when the person has been able to work and carry on social relations and take care of himself. In general, he has become unable to get organized to do any of these. Language communication disturbances system, and sometimes called the formal thought disorder. The individual does not lack education or ability to be, but seems to put together in a logical order. For example, I'm growing my father's hair out. He means something different, obviously. Sense of self. The individual is usually confused about his identity, even whether he is male or female. I believe that he's being controlled by cosmic or oceanic powers. Perception. Individual seems to be unable to sort out all of the information which comes to him through the senses. Typical reactions are those that feels too alert. Everything that seems to be pouring out at once. His nerves and super sensitive objects seem brighter, noises are louder. Specific symptoms of schizophrenia. These symptoms may vary from individual to individual. Disturbances, thought, speech activity, words may be in the wrong order. Thoughts may be composed of sense fragments. This reflects the confusion of the person's thought process. An inappropriate emotional response. The person can appear with emotionally cold. Happy news does not bring him for joy in the schizophrenic person. Sometimes schizophrenic makes an inappropriate response. For example, the person is told of the death of a loved one and laughs. Withdrawal, individual physical or psychological, may pull back in the interaction with other people from its environment. Withdrawal is a coping mechanism, the individual's way of coping with the stress he sees in the world. Regression, the cope with the regressing and revert to an earlier type of behavior in order to deal with the situation at hand. Earlier behavior is characteristic of earlier level of development. For example, an adult might resort to behavioral typical of his teenage years. Delusions. A delusion defined and may be fixed belief of the type of delusions include paranoid delusion, grandiose delusions, somatic delusions, and delusion of poverty. Paranoid delusions are which the individual believes someone is out to get him, although it is not true. A person in grandiose delusion with grandeur, may believe he is a sports hero, famous political leader, someone all-powerful like God. Individual somatic delusions focus on his body, convinced that he is a victim of frightening disease. Person with delusion of poverty is convinced that he is penniless, reasonable for the downfall of the family, although it is not true. Hallucinations. Schizophrenic person may hear, taste, see, and smell and feel things that are not there. 1-6 personality disorders. Throughout their lives, people continually develop and change as required by the changing demand with the opportunity and limitation accompanied with a different stage as the life of the individual grows, have with a certain broad traits, coping styles, ways of behaving, social. Yes, Mama. Alright, 1-6 personality disorders. Throughout our lives, people continually develop and change as required. Changing demands, opportunity, and limitations accompany different stages of the life. The individual grows out of certain broad traits. Coping styles, ways of behaving socially tend to emerge. By the time a person has completed teen years, he's developed his own unique ways of dealing with life situations. These ways are patterns of his personality. Adult personality is usually able to deal effectively with society in which he lives. In contrast, there are some individuals whose personality development has been warped. Individuals cannot live comfortably in any society. Such individuals have personality disorders. Typical personality disorders are not causing stress and anxiety, but rather immature, distorted personality development. Paranoid personality. Paranoid feels signed out, taken advantage, mistreated, plotted against, stolen from, spied upon, ignored, otherwise mistreated by enemies. These feelings and delusions, in truth, no one is out to get to the person. Characteristic paranoid personality include the following: hypersensitive, rigid, suspicious, jealous, envious, exaggerated sense of importance, tendency to blame others. Paranoid does not seem to interfere with the rest of the individual's personality side with the area with the paranoid individual may be able to function very well in a highly organized manner. Cleidiothematic personality, mild personality disorder, characterized extreme mood swings, elation with a depression swings, however, not disabling individual. Individual may exert exhilarated and outgoing on a high energy level of hypomanic behavior. On the other hand, he may feel melancholy with a mild depressive life state. He feels lonely, sympathetic, kind, quiet, and a little sorry for himself. Note, if in a stressful situation event, no apparent reason, psychomatic personality may develop with a manic depressive psychosis, extremely personality, psychotic disorder characterized by long periods of overexcitement and overactivity and long periods of depression and underactivity. Schizoid personality, person characterized with shyness, oversensitiveness, seclusiveness, eccentricity in communication behavior. An example of schizoid personality is an adult who has a life pattern of social isolation, little no interaction with the other people, distant, somewhat always distraught of other people, a little rather fearful, sensitive, dealing with people. He concentrates only on non-people details of his life, such as meaning of the wash before wearing or on a new pair of his jeans. Does this mean wash the jeans before wearing the first time, or some other reason? Do the jeans need to be washed each time before they are worn? He considers the question for several days. Type of dilemma is comfortable for the individual's schizoid personality because of the problem requires no interaction with any other personality. Explosive personality, the distinguished feature of personality, is fraudulently outbursts with aggression, especially under pressure. An individual with the type of personality becomes over-excitable irritable and over-responsive. Obsessive-compulsive personality. Obsession can be defined as persistent preoccupation with something, an idea of the feeling of the compulsion, maybe to define irresistible, impulsive. Individual obsessive-compulsive personality feels compelled to think about something he does not want to think about and carry out some action against his will. People with the type of the personality usually realize behavior is irrational, but they feel they cannot stop the behavior. Characteristics of type personality include the following: rigid punctuality, it is strict observance of formalities of conduct, fastoids, hard to please, most critical and demanding, very formal, over continuous, hysterical personality. Individual's typical personality exhibits the following characteristics: vain, self-indulgent, over-dramatic, exhibitionist. Asthmatic personality. Following characteristics typical of the personality: easily tired, low energy level, lack of enthusiasm, diminished capacity for enjoyment, oversensitive to stress. May develop in personality disorder, neurosynthetic neurotic disorder, characterized with complaints with chronic weakness, easily tired, and lack of enthusiasm. Antisocial personality, psychopath, sociopath. The antisocial personality is characterized with a lack of ethical, moral development, apparent with an inability to person to follow with approved models of behavior. Psychopath and sociopath are both terms antisocial personality. Both may be defined as a personality disorder involved with a marked lack of ethical and moral development. Of psychopath exhibits characteristics such as disregard for the rules of society, immature difficulty postponing gratification, poor control of the impulse, little ability to consider the consequence for his action. Individual with a determined personality could want a new car, steal a new car, shoot a security guard in the process, feel no guilt. This type of person would find it intolerable to work at the job, save money, buy a new car in the future. He wants pleasure now without considering the past or the future. Passive-aggressive personality. Individual type of personality typically express hostility in direct, non-violent ways. In other words, passively characteristics such as individual include procrastinating, why today, what you can put off until tomorrow, forgetting, deliberately keeping something from being done. Insufficient type of behavior is more often present in work situations, but can be present in situations with other. Passive-aggressive personality never really confronts a problem difficult directly. Behaviors which result in no problem solving at all. Inadequate personality characteristic. Typically, the type of the personality include non-normal intellectual endowment, ineffectual, inept, unconcerned, reaching, setting goals. Passive dependent personality. Type of the personality extremely dependent on other people, suffers acute disconformment and almost panic having to be alone, self-confidence lacking. Such individuals feel helpless working by themselves, even though they may be very competent with good work skills. Listing characteristics typical passive dependent personalities include absent self-confidence, immature personality, overwhelmed feelings of helplessness, fear, and indecision, clings to others for support. 7 therapeutic interventions. Today, mental health professionals are concentrating preventing mental health problems. In 1960, individual mental health problems were usually seen only after a problem became severe. Typically, the person went so far away from their home or area to recover. In treatment necessary today, a person is treated in the area in which he lives, as not only will his life be disrupted as little as possible, but also he will be able to keep in contact with support groups, his family, and his friends. Additional patient must be placed in a hospital but is returned to the community as soon as possible so that the problem will not become chronic. Psychotherapy definition. Psychotherapy is a treatment of mental disorders, psychological methods. Almost everyone has an experience of being helped by some advice with a relative or a friend. Sometimes experience has prompted us to the drastic changes in our lives. Psychotherapy is very close to the advice or the experience that's caused you to make the changing in our lives. A basic assumption in psychotherapy is the individual personality problem can change. You can learn more effective ways of perceiving, evaluating, behaving so that they will be able to function in society more effectively, happily. General goals of psychotherapy include these steps. 1. Changing in the patterns of behavior which maladaptive, that is, behavior which is detrimental to well-being individual or the group, improving an individual's ability to deal with others, resolving a person's inner conflicts, thus reducing personality stress. Changing person's inaccurate assumptions about himself or the world around him. And 5. Helping person achieve clear sense of who he is. Alright, no, all the above will help troubled person toward a more meaningful, fulfilling life. Drug commonly used for treatment of mental illness. One of the medical professionals long term has been discover drugs that combat mental illness disorders effectively. In years past, research centered medications would have sought soothing, calming, sleeping, inducing effects. These drugs would help manage distraught, excited, sometimes violent people. Current research has focused on development of drugs which allow a troubled person to lead a more normal life than just sedate him. Major tranquilizers include chlorpheniramine or thorazine, thyroxine, marinol, triofluorazine, stelgilazine. Other drugs used in treating mental disorder called lithium carbonate, an anti-manic agent, a minor tranquilizer, anti-anxiety agent such as Librium, Valium, Vistrol, or Miltol. Continue with exercise. Exercise 1. The following exercise are answered completely with an incomplete statement. Writing answer space provided as you have completed each answer. You turn the solution located at the end of the exercise. Check. Normal behaviors defined as in this lesson list characteristics of normal behavior. And then special McDonald school between McDonald in school being treated in new MOS, studied very little. Last examination received a low score. He complains that he received a low test score because the instructor made it too hard. Special McDonald is using a defense mechanism. Mr. Jenkins daydreams. His favorite daydream is one in which corrects his boss's mistakes during a staff meeting and publicly acclaimed as the leader of the group of the people. The defense mechanism he is using is Adam Mills can only be described obese. He weighs at least 100 pounds or more than he should. He's disappointed and unhappy despite overweight. His condition goes on eating binges. The defense mechanism uses against term. Ross Hunter did not win a promotion when he worked very hard, which he thought he deserved. Ross continually defends his new boss too much. Ross additionally now found defends his company's policies more vigorously than he ever did before. The defense minister using the cause. Neurosis defined in this lesson as Mark Dalton constantly washes his hands over. There's no real reason to do so. He is suffering from blank disorder, a type of anxiety neurosis. Studies have found sometimes students flight school develop partial numbness tongue with a flight school students develop trouble seeing. Physical examination revealed no physical reason for these afflictions. Students are probably suffering from a condition called blank neurosis. Cecily Hunter has an abnormal fear of heights. Working with a footbridge over the river has something she can do. Her fears high places is called blank. Is one of the blank neuroses. Nick Timberland abnormally uncomfortably in crowds, being a mob with the people. The Rocks concert is beyond him and suffers with the disorder. Blank lists 3 specific symptoms of schizophrenia. Drugs are commonly used treatment mental illness. In past years, drugs have been used to calm, sedate patient. Research today focused on discovering drugs have mentally ill patients lead to. The definition of psychotherapy is given in this lesson is. Check your answers on the next page. Lesson 2, burnout, depression, and suicide.